Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vice President, General Manager, ServiceNow, Carl Vanderpool.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. We're having an exciting agenda today, and I'm going to jump right into it. We're going to talk about a number of things. First of all, we're going to talk about how analytics has gotten where it is today. So the state of the industry, where are we, how do we get here? And then we're going to take a little bit of an approach on how ServiceNow is handling analytics inside the platform. So we have a different approach. We have an in-platform approach, as you can imagine, because we are all about an in-platform vision. Then we're going to do a deep dive on some of the new functionality and some of the new innovation that we delivered in our last two releases, Istanbul and Jakarta. And after that, we're going to hear from a customer. So I'm very pleased that Donna from Cox Automotive is happy to join us and talk about the customer journey. What did they learn? How did they implement some of the best practices for you guys to absorb? And then we're going to close out with a very, very exciting topic that you also heard about this morning, machine learning and analytics, the two close cousins, and how they come together to strengthen the capabilities of the platform. So, but before we do, I would like to start off with an explanation on how we view analytics at ServiceNow. And Dave Wright this morning talked about this as well, so there's going to be a little bit of a replication. I'm going to talk about it a little bit differently. So this basically has been the roadmap for all our releases ever since Eureka. So with Eureka, we started with the performance analytics product, and we've been building this up over the last consecutive releases. And this has been on a high-level, conceptual level, this has been our roadmap. So it starts off with the notion of a single report. And a single report basically is a status update. It tells you exactly where you are today, right? And that's pretty powerful. And we had reporting in the platform for a very long time, and we make that better and better and better over the years. But a report gives you one single data point in time, and it doesn't really answer the question whether you are getting better or worse. It lacks perspective. And that's where you need time series. So with time series, you can now start snapshotting data and trend data over time, and you can see whether you have improved or deteriorated your performance. Extremely important when we want to get to a data-driven, metrics-driven organization where decisions are based on data. Now, once you have that, and you have that perspective that you got better or worse, you can start setting targets and goals for yourself. And when you do that, you can now compare where you are compared to that goal and look at the delta. And obviously, the two next steps that we have is, when am I going to reach my target? How long is that going to take? And if that takes way too long, what do I need to do in order to get there faster? Now, these are basically the concepts. So a single report you could probably refer to as the reactive enterprise status report. Something happens, I run a report, now I know where I am. You already become a little bit more proactive when you start looking at time series. Now you know whether you're on the right track, whether you're looking at an anomaly, or whether this is always the case. So we got some labels for these, and the way that we label these technologies is really performance analytics is comparing yourself to targets and goals. Predictive analytics is about predicting when you're going to hit those goals, and prescriptive is how do I avoid when it's a bad outcome and bend that curve, or how do I accelerate my route to my desired state. So that's a little bit the concept, and you will see that this kind of conceptual model will be driving our roadmap in the consecutive releases as well. The two boxes in blue is really where we're focused on, the predictive and the prescriptive. And this is where you can imagine machine learning and artificial intelligence, plays a big role. So we'll come to that a little bit later on in the presentation. Now, another big trend that is going on is that analytics used to be, you go to this BI portal somewhere in the organization if you have access, if you're one of the happy few that got cleared access to that data, you can log into that BI portal and you can watch a couple of reports and dashboards. But that's really old school. What we're actually seeing, and the trend that we're seeing and where we're heading to, is that every single business user in your organization will be leveraging the power of analytics in their day-to-day job, not only on dashboards, but inside the applications whenever they do their work, in forms, in lists, on end-user portals, via email, via mobile, through Connect, through bots. So we're moving from a dashboard-centric BI world to an embedded, empowered analytics world. And on top of that, we are also seeing that the amount of data, and we talked about that this morning in the keynote, is exploding. So more data, every user needs to be able to leverage it, and it needs to be everywhere, not only on a dashboard. So that was a little bit the setting that I wanted to give before we continue with the session. What I want to do now is bring up my good friend Eric Muller to talk a little bit about how do we get here? How did the industry get here? Come on, Eric.
Hey, how's it going? Good to be here. Thanks for coming. And as Carl was just describing, the future of what you can do with analytics is quite exciting. We're going to stop, though, and sort of set the stage as to how did we get to this point? How did the industry get to this point? It's kind of worth thinking about because in the past, those of you who have been working with data, it's not always been quite this smooth. And so let's look back briefly, and then we'll move forward. So.
Let me hand this to you.
Nice. Single button. Should be good. Well, sometimes technology evolves, much as with nature, in a kind of a quirky path. And so you end up with the result that's probably not what anyone expected, and it's not really necessarily anyone's idea of a good solution. In the case of broadly speaking, analytics and business intelligence, it's sort of a duck-billed platypus that we've all kind of inherited. And so you might say, you know, how did we end up with something that's complex, kind of intimidating? Often people sort of need some specialty help. Those who are behind the scenes are given challenges and they can't scramble to get things in time. Well, I think the real reason is that this environment that we've grown up with and kind of come to expect, in a sense, lowered our expectations. It has to do with the constraints, the design limits when the idea of using the data was thought about. So going back, kind of when dinosaurs still roamed the earth, let's say 20, 30 years ago, you know, what people were told was, hey, your data's good, but you really can't save maybe 1% of it, and we need to put it in this special place, and storage, well, that's very limited. The bandwidth to get things moved around, that's also constrained. And so it let people see some data, but in a way that was not really satisfying. So I want to say a word more about that, in fact. What we were told was, hey, you know, it's this thing called ETL. You've got this data, you've generated data in the systems that you use, the applications that you run, the workflows in your enterprise. We're just going to put it through this ETL kind of box, and we'll put it in this separate place over there. It sort of sounded okay, but if you were on the receiving end of that message, you might have asked, well, what does ETL stand for again? And it stands for extraction, transform, and load, which to me sort of sounds like a painful medical procedure. I think Carl thinks of ETL as endless tedium and labor intensity, something like that. What's kind of going on behind the scenes is, you know, here's what's happening in the ETL pipeline. It's a very complex system. There's a lot of different feeds. There's a lot of different filters. There's a lot of transformations that happen. And again, it's a remnant of a legacy set of systems and different disparate operating systems and applications. And so you might say, I'll sign up for that level of complexity if I had to. But the good news is there's a better way to do this. So before we get to the better way, let's just say a bit more. Now, when we talk about doing analytics in our platform, you might say, that sounds okay, but I could just use a visualization engine from some third party. It sort of seems okay. And I think we would just say to count all the costs. So what really has to happen when you move data off platform, it isn't just that you get a visualization engine, but you've got to put that data somewhere. You've got to manage that repository. Again, essentially those pipelines that bring data into a third-party system. And you need specialists then to maintain that on top of the people that are trying to run the systems and the applications and the workflows that really matter. So that's a bit about the cost. And now I do want to say there's a better way. We often at ServiceNow talk about the consumer internet as a prompt and an inspiration to say there's smoother ways to handle interactions with humans. It's not just that the user interface is snappy when we're going to Amazon or something, but the fact that consumer internet is typically cloud-based, it gives access to a whole set of data. So there's beneath the surface a bunch of things that happen. So data is, in the way that Carl mentioned, embedded. It's below your fingertips. If you think of an example, let's say you want to go surfing. What are the things that you might need? Well, you might check the weather. You'll look on a map. You might see it's a little bit cold, so you go online and get a wetsuit, and then you might map yourself a route the best way to the ocean, to the beach. Each of those activities, in a way that's, again, very seamless and basically effortless, is surfacing data, analytics beneath your fingers and beneath the decisions that you're being steered toward, but it's helping you. And it's not painful and it's not sort of intimidating. It just happens naturally. And so we thought, how can we deliver analytics in the enterprise that follows basically those design principles? And it's a slightly different domain in the enterprise. So for us, what we wanted to build on are these three key pillars. And the things you'll see in the rest of the presentations will build on basically the real-time nature of doing things in platform. So when you want to make a decision, you don't want to wait for a quarterly or a monthly report, but essentially the moment you want to make a decision, you should have the relevant data available. And doing it in platform, that essentially comes for free. It should be, when we say native, what we mean is it's sort of the ultimate version of embedded. It just says that when you're designing applications, when you're designing workflows, you're already anticipating and thinking, what are the things that need to surface to help these decisions be effective? And when we update those applications, we don't have to worry that that whole kind of old school way with plumbing and bringing things to a separate kind of dead-end warehouse that just lands data never to be seen again. That's all wiped out. So it happens native. You can update things and not have to worry about it. And the third pillar is the things are secure. And so the idea here is just simply you want to set the limits on who sees what data once when you're making things available, but you don't want to have to revisit that whole set of questions, who should see what, in a second realm when you move things to another environment. It should naturally follow the ACLs that you've set up once and for all on the ServiceNow platform. So with those three pillars in mind, let's now shift a little bit from a backward-looking view of the industry and think about what we can do in the future. And Carl, I'll give you the clicker.
All right. So on that last point, protected by the ACLs, remember when I said we want to provide every single person in the enterprise with access to analytics? Well, that's why that's really important. You already set up your ACLs for your HR app, your security app, your ITBM app, your IT app, or any app that you build on the platform. So why would you have to forklift the data out, replicate those security constraints again somewhere else? If you do it directly in the instance, you can actually have the people who do the work make better decisions day to day. Extremely important. So let's dive in a little bit. And you probably wonder, first of all, what is this? Anybody has an idea? They're bike handles. Very good. So they're bike handles of a specific bike. It says ultimate performance, and that's exactly what we're talking about. We think of analytics as the steering wheel of a high-performance bike. You know, you steer with analytics. You make better decisions. You decide whether you go left or right. And it's not the after-the-fact reporting. It's operational intelligence directly in the app while you're doing your work, right? And that's really, if we move to predictions and prescriptions, we don't want to have that on the dashboard for executives. We want those predictions and prescriptions to be available to the people who do the work. That's where most of the value comes from. So we talk about steering with analytics, faster decision making, and that's really the drive. Now, how does that look? Well, here's a simplified picture of how analytics looks inside the ServiceNow platform. So on the bottom, you see the Now Cloud, the always-on cloud. Secure, real-time, we talked about that. The ability to integrate and onboard third-party data, really powerful. All the applications that we build or that you've already built on that platform. And then inside of that same platform, we have all these analytics capabilities that we just talked about. The snapshotting engine, the real-time reporting engine, the dashboards, the visualizations, but also the concept of performance analytics, predictive and prescriptive. And then the last section is really about how do we apply all that technology, that analytics technology, inside to empower those apps. So we're going to talk you through 3 distinct demos a little bit later on that will talk exactly about how we do that. What are some of the capabilities on predictions and prescriptions? What are some of the other features that we enhanced in the platform? And how do we apply all the analytics to the apps? So, but first, let's talk a little bit about roadmap. We had 2 releases since the last Knowledge. One is out now, Istanbul, and one is already out for us, but not released to you yet. We're in the process of releasing that, which is the Jakarta release. And we're going to tell you and talk you a little bit through what we did in the Istanbul and the Jakarta release. We're going to do a little preview of Kingston, the next release that we're working on, and then we're going to show you some of these technologies. So in Istanbul, what was really, really important for us is to dig in on the user experience. There was a lot of talk about a better user experience, and you gave us the feedback that the homepages and the dashboards that we had were not good enough. It's hard to build layouts. They were not responsive. If I looked at them on a different form factor, the charts didn't resize. So we moved away from the old homepages and we started building new complete dashboards that are exactly that, responsive. So now you can drag and drop, you can easily resize your dashboards, you can change the layout on the fly simply by dragging and dropping. A lot easier to find the content to put on the dashboard, and since Jakarta you can start sharing those dashboards. The other big thing in Istanbul was our first steps into prescriptive analytics. We came out with Spotlight, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Spotlight later on. And the last thing that I want to say about Istanbul is that we spend a lot of time on coming up with reductions, storage reductions, as well as performance improvements in the platform for analytics. And why is that important? Because we know that you want to onboard a lot of data. So we're ready for that. So we reduced the storage reduction footprint with 6 times, and in some cases even with 90%. And so when you upgrade to Istanbul, that storage reduction will be available. Eric, when you want to take us through Jakarta?
Yeah, use this just as a guide. We're going to take a look at Jakarta in a little footage of how it looks. But watch for the predictive analytics. Actually, Carl, you may walk us through a predictive analysis. So we'll have a look at that. And you got a little of a teaser from Dave Wright this morning at the keynote. A second theme, actually the overall theme for Jakarta, I should say, is kind of friendly data accessibility. And so making predictions easier and automatic to do is part of it. Bring your own data, BYOD, is another piece. The ServiceNow platform is quite powerful to land data and make it available, but making it easy to do. So one click and you can pull in a spreadsheet is sort of step 1 on a long journey for that, and we'll see a little view of that. The other 2 things to call out, and you can watch for these in the Jakarta preview that we'll just show in a sec, The interactive analysis, really powerful. And this is that embedded idea. So rather than having to think and plan as to how I want to see my data, simply right-click on any form or list and be exposed to the data in a visual way. That comes in Jakarta. And the new report designer. Again, you'll see this, and the basic idea is first-time users shouldn't have to really think too hard to be able to create a report, see in advance or as they're building it what the visual looks like, manipulate it, change it, style it, and then be able to use and actually share it. So those are a few of the things in Jakarta that we'll have a look at.
Yeah, especially the last one is pretty awesome, the new report designer. Again, you gave us the feedback that for first-time users, building reports and building visualizations to put on that dashboard is not intuitive. So we really took at best practices in the industry, and as you'll see in Jakarta, we're coming out with a brand new report designer, which will make it very easy for you to build powerful reports. I want to shift gears a little bit and do a little spoiler alert. What are we working on? What are we working on now? So this is all out. We're waiting to put that in the hands of you. But we are already on our way developing Kingston. And the big concept in Kingston for us is what we call data insights. And I'm going to use an analogy here. It's like sometimes analytics, when you find an anomaly, you need to start drilling down and looking to the root cause. So you slice and dice, and you want to have endless drilling and slicing and dicing of the data in order to figure out why did something happen. So you're searching for needles. And sometimes if you have a lot of dimensions and breakdowns, there's a lot of slicing and dicing you can do. And it takes a lot of time, it's consuming, and sometimes it's pretty hard. So what if we could remove all the hay from the haystack? Think about it. That's what we mean with data insights. So it's again where machine learning meets analytics. We're going to do that analysis for you, and the idea is that we're going to show you the 5 things that you need to know about a particular time series. These things are on the move, there's a change here, this particular group is behind the ball. So you don't have to slice and dice anymore. We're just going to serve that right up to you. Basically analyzing the data, we will get some help from the machines. So that's what we're working on in Kingston. And that's the next step when it comes to prescriptive analytics, because now we're going to tell you exactly which of the things you need to watch out for if you want to bend the curve. So it's pretty exciting technology. It's again where machine learning and analytics come together, and we can do that because we got all the data in that single platform. Let's do a little deep dives, and we're going to do 3 deep dives here. We're first going to show you a little bit more about predictions and prescriptions, Spotlight. Then we're going to run a video on things that we did in the platform. And last, we're going to bring up some more people to talk about how we applied all that analytics inside our other apps. So analytic predictions, and again, this is a little bit of a repeat from this morning. So people says like, hey, predictions are really hard. There's tons of algorithms and methods that you can use to do forecasting. And if it was easy, we would be using the same algorithm, all of us, to predict the stock market and not have to work. So that clearly is not the case. So how do you know which prediction algorithm applies best to your time series? Do we need to hire people for that? And the short answer is no, you don't, because what we did is we built what we call an auto decider, and that auto decider will select the right algorithm for you. So we'll have multiple prediction algorithms. The best one will be default selected for you. And when your time series, after, let's say, 90 days or 120 days, turns out that there's seasonality in there that the first algorithms didn't find yet because it had like a 30-day cycle. So after 4 cycles, the algorithm with seasonality picks it up. The system will automatically change and switch and will select the best algorithm for you. And then we'll use that one to start predicting the future outcomes for you. And then what we can do is we can tell you, hey, it will take 7 days before the system predicts that your target will be hit. And what we can do with that is pretty cool, because now we can alert you proactively. We can tell you this through email, through Connect, through mobile, but in theory, we just throw a ServiceNow event, so you can do whatever you want with it. You can write complete apps to respond on it, or you can trigger workflow to automatically do something, raise an incident, whatever you want. It's a ServiceNow event. So this is really also an engine that you can use in building better and smarter and more intelligent apps. Now, prescriptive analytics is about Spotlight, and Spotlight is really about putting the light on the things that you need to know. So everything below the surface. Not the tip of the iceberg, but the iceberg that sits underneath there. And how do we do that? We introduced the scoring and ranking algorithm. And I'm going to give you an example of the average time to resolve. So let's assume we're looking at a key performance indicator, average time to resolve. We want to drive that down, but we can only measure a time to resolve after a ticket is resolved. So you want to know which of my tickets, open outstanding incidents, are most likely to age and to take a long time. And there are a couple of characteristics that you can search for. If I assign my tickets to people who have a big backlog, probably will take a long time before they pick it up. Or if I assign it to somebody who's not in the office or is dealing on an emergency, probably going to ignore it. If it's complex, or whether we have to reassign it a couple of times because we don't know who the right owner is. But what if there are tickets that have all of these symptoms, or more than one? They are even more likely to age than the ones that have one of those symptoms. Now, by basically giving penalty points to every bad symptom, or bonus points for good symptoms, because you can also reverse this and put a spotlight on things that are going extremely well, you can start identifying those records. And in this particular example, average time to resolve, we can now proactively point you to the troubled incidents, the incidents that are most likely to negatively influence your time to resolve if you do not intercept them in time. We can then also tell you, if you don't intercept them, which SLAs and services are likely to be violated. So the business impact. And then we can tell you, well, which teams, categories, priorities, where in your organization do these incidents occur? What are the symptoms that you need to fight? Is it ignored work? Is it reassignments? And so you can start taking corrective action, optimize your process, and make sure that the leaders of those teams will start changing their behavior so that we have better outcomes. So for this next section, we're going to roll a little video, and I'm going to ask Eric Muller to kind of narrate that for you. This is all the features that we have on the Jakarta platform. Please roll video.
I'm going to give it light narration. So we're starting with some interesting data that might want to be shared. So with a couple clicks, in this example, Carl says to me, hey, you might want to look at this. This is open incidents per week. I receive that and immediately drop it into my own dashboard. Because it's a responsive canvas, I can move it where I like, drag it, fit it, make it a little bigger, more prominent. And then I'm double-clicking on it to add some more data to it. Carl's idea is that maybe I can bring some data from the outside. So I pull up the new report designer, which is friendly looking. I simply click on the spreadsheet that's relevant, give it a name, and that'll be incorporated. A couple selections, how long I want the data to persist. And then with that outside data, we go through that same styling to choose what type of diagram or chart, change the color. It seems to be a bad trend. I'm going to put it in red. Maybe I'll put the data labels on it just to see exactly what the numbers are at each point. Pretty cool. So there it is. Outside data just overlaid on top of the existing ServiceNow generated data. There you go. Let's see. So again, we're styling it a little bit different. Let's go with the line chart look. And now we're going to drill down into a real-time indicator. So that 422 we might want to know something more about. So we look at the detailed scorecard for that. And we look at the records themselves. And this is the interactive analysis that we talked about. So clicking just on a list view, I'm dropped into this visual way to understand the data. I can select or deselect the subset of data that I want. And rather than having to have 1,000 fixed reports, I can simply have one that does all the talking and actually does it in a way that's visual. So as I filter and select and stack the bars the way I want, I get the intuition that's useful to make a decision and to understand it better. And actually there, I just click through on the visual to another visual. So now there's a heat map. And here's, of course, the live data. So it's just a little teaser on Jakarta.
Thanks. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So the power to onboard external data, overlay that, work on an interactive dashboard, collaborate together, share that dashboard, resize it, just as you could expect from a modern platform. So now we're going to change a little bit of gears here and talk about how we apply that analytics inside our apps and what we've done there with out-of-the-box content. So I want to bring on stage Heath Ramsey to take us through that topic.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Carl. So you've heard Carl and you've heard Eric talk a little bit about the predictive and the prescriptive, but that doesn't mean that we've forgotten about the other stuff. And that's really what I'm here to talk to you a little bit about. So they discussed a little bit about the analytics platform. And as you can see, there's a lot of our applications that sit on top of that analytics platform, including IT, CSM, HR, security operations. And we've peeled back the covers a little bit to show you a little bit of the inner workings and the machinations of what's going on. But what does it actually mean to you? What it means to you is performance analytics. Performance analytics. There we go. Thank you. and that's really what we're going to be investing in. We're going to continue to invest in. And that's how you're going to consume all these different things that we're talking about here. So let's talk a little bit about what that actually means. We're going to be creating, and we have created, a lot of out-of-the-box content for you to be able to execute and really start working with performance analytics across all of these different areas of domains. So in security operations, some of the things that you might want to do are things like resolve real security threats fast. So how do we create an actionable dashboard for you? You're looking at an example of one on the screen right now. And what we try to do is we work with domain experts within ServiceNow. We're working with the security operations business unit so that we make sure that we're building dashboards that are in the language of the people that are consuming it. You happen to be looking at one that pertains to what I would call a service owner for security. And those people might be interested in things like finding out the risk exposure within the organization. They are also going to want to see the risk categorization and response. And you'll notice that we have not only the trend information, but we've got the list right there. We have prioritized actions. So this whole idea of actionability and being able to get from the strategic information all the way down to the record level very quickly and very easily. And it doesn't matter what role you have within the organization. We've created dashboards not just for the service owners, but we've also created dashboards for the workers using things like inform analytics. What should people be working on today? What are the most important things to work into our data quality, making sure that we've got the right data to surface this stuff? But also on the executive side, making sure that we've got executive dashboards, that red, yellow, green, that allows the organization to truly be responsive, which I'll talk about here in just a couple of minutes. But it's not just security operations. As I mentioned, we have it for everything, every solution that we have at ServiceNow. So within HR, as I mentioned, this is in the language of HR. This is about consumerizing the employee service experience. So now you're seeing things like tracking the different kinds of issues that are coming in through case management, looking at the efficiency, and of course, making sure that you have the list of prioritized actions. The same is true for customer service management, being able to resolve the customer issues at light speed. So again, satisfaction status. You saw a little bit about this with Ashley from GE this morning. This is the idea that we're going after here, which is giving people the information that they need in the language that they need to consume in order to do the best job possible. And of course, we've got IT, ITOM, ITSM, ITBM, and being able to really understand what's going on with respect to your IT service management business, how that relates over to outages and being able to eliminate those service outages, to really understanding the cost of your projects and how it relates to those types of things. So it really allows you to take control, and it's a great way for you to get started. Again, we have a lot of content for you to get started, and I'm going to put these numbers up on the screen right now. 75, 300, 500. That's a lot of content to work with. But then the question comes down to, that might be a mountain of information. How do I actually get through that, and how do I come up with something meaningful? And that's where we come to the next piece, which is the vision and the journey. So in my role of customer success, I work with many of you to try to figure out how do we make sense of the analytics and how do we make sure that we're getting the right analytics up on the screen. The way that I like to talk about that is this idea of responsive business. Your executives want the performance car, and they talk about stuff like, I want to gain $1 million in service desk efficiency. People have heard that before? Yeah? Well, how do you get there? Well, what I do is I try to deconstruct that into the processes. So in order to get that efficiency, you might have incident management, you might have knowledge management. Those are all things that are going to factor into that efficiency. So your processes are the engine that make the performance car run. And so this is all information that is geared towards your process and your service owners. But again, it doesn't stop there, because the only time you're actually able to really run the engine is when you've got the right data. Data is the fuel that makes all of these things go. So your dashboards that are geared towards the workers, being able to get information about organizational structure, business services, everything that you have in platform is ultimately going to feed up into your analytics. So you can see the vision here of how your workers, your process owners and service owners, and your executives are all aligned. The data flows from right down in the record level all the way up to your executives. So what I would like to do is I would like to talk a little bit about this idea of the journey with a friend of mine I've had a great opportunity to work with. Her name is Donna Woodruff, and she's from Cox Automotive. I'd like to bring her onto the stage, please. So, Donna, I guess we started working about 4 or 5 months ago. Why don't you talk about Cox Automotive and some of the problems that you're facing based upon what you guys were seeing as a business?
Sure, absolutely. We are a part of a 119-year-old organization. Cox Automotive is one of those large business groups. We are comprised of 5 different solution areas, and we're transforming the way the world buys, sells, and owns vehicles. So some of the brands that you may be most familiar with are Autotrader.com, Kelley Blue Book. We provide inventory solutions for dealers with our Manheim Auto Auctions, and we also build ERP-like software for dealerships to manage their inventory and help service their vehicles.
Yep. And so as you're putting all this information together, you have all these different business units. What are some of the challenges that the CIO is facing in trying to really manage what's going on here?
Sure, absolutely. As you can well imagine, being a large heterogeneous organization, we inherited a lot of platforms with our acquisitions. And so it was hard to get that single pane of performance of how we are doing in technology as well as in other areas. And this is kind of what we started with. It's a very flat PowerPoint presentation that was pulled together with a lot of manual, people working very hard and a manual effort, spreadsheets and data's everywhere. So, and also you can see there's a lot of things that are green. Everything's green, everything's fine, right? So there was a lot of subjectivity put into building these dashboards. Well,
and part of it is that fear of the executives want to see green, so I'm going to put the green up there, right? So in looking at this, you had your top level, but even when you started going down a little bit deeper, here's an example of what one of your security dashboards looked like. What were some of the issues that were going on with this, especially as you started to dig into what was going on?
Yeah, I think it's just really understanding what's actionable here and where the data is coming from. Are we getting it consistently month over month? Do we really understand if we're doing better or worse than we were in the prior month? So the trend analysis was really difficult to visualize.
Right, and some of the metrics, I remember sitting in a conference room with you, we were looking at some of these numbers, and for example, 4 applications scanned for vulnerability. There was no context in terms of what that number meant, right? So if you look at this idea of the customer journey, the way that Cox had been exploring it, we have this really a reported business because there wasn't a way to take action, service observance as opposed to service improvement. And where was the data coming from?
Exactly. The data was all over the place, right? And even within our own instance, the data wasn't always reliable, right? But you know, we got there.
Yep, we got there. And I think this is a picture of what that end state looked like. So tell the crowd about what's going on here.
Yeah, you can see that this is a much more broader area of focus for how we're doing on our performance. We're covering areas around production engineering, delivery operations, security and risk, and we're bringing up to the top the most important things that we want our leadership to react to or understand right out of the box. And then from there, we can drill down if there's an area that they want to learn more about. And I think one of the biggest things here in the after picture is that is really the data. We went through a little mini journey ourselves around the data. When we first lit up the performance analytics application, we found that you know, some of our assignment groups and our team members needed to be retrained because they weren't resolving tickets the way we needed them to resolve tickets in such a way that would give us good, consistent data across the board. It showed areas of bottlenecks. And so once we addressed those areas, retrained some teams, we got the behavior working properly, which then allowed us to really see the metrics for what they were.
Yep. And what you see here is what I call the 3 A's. It's automated, it's actionable, it's accurate. It's because all the information comes from in platform and all the stakeholders are aligned. So in the context of the customer journey, really what Cox was able to achieve is truly this idea of a responsive business. The executives have the information that they need to make business decisions. It is linked to the services, and you've got an accurate data foundation to work from. If you would like to learn more about Donna's journey and Cox Automotive's journey, that session is happening tomorrow. It's called Death to PowerPoint, not Death by PowerPoint. We all experience Death by PowerPoint on a daily basis, like right now. Just kidding. Death to PowerPoint, 3:50 tomorrow afternoon. And if you'd like to learn more about the customer journey and how it pertains to ServiceNow, we have a Now on Now session for performance analytics that is Thursday morning at 10:10, and that'll be presented by me and one of my colleagues, Tara Romero. So with that, thank you for your time, and I would love to bring Carl back on stage to go on to the next section.
All right. Thank you, Donna. Thanks a lot. All right. That was awesome. So we learned, you know, from a reported business to a responsive business, getting those proactive insights with time series, being able to drill down, real time, sounds pretty good. But we also learned that it starts with a data foundation. And your reports are as accurate as your data foundation is. So sometimes overlooked. And the best way to get your data foundation back in shape is to start actually visualizing that data foundation and report it. But there's some other things that we can do. So let's talk about that, because machine learning can play an important role. So for this next section, I want to bring up my good buddy Alan, our CTO, to talk about machine learning and analytics. Come on up, Alan.
Wow.
All right. So this morning, Dave Wright introduced our intelligent automation engine.
Absolutely.
Why do we need an intelligent automation engine?
Well, we all have to be more intelligent, Carl. That's obvious. But why do we need an automated intelligence, and why do we need an intelligent automation engine? Really, the idea is to take machine learning and to apply it to do really good predictive analytics on the platform. To be able to think about where we're going to go and to be able to be predictive in terms of things in terms of routing work, things in terms of categorization, using topics that allow us to really take the knowledge that they have within individual customer instances and make really solid predictions about work that can be done on the platform. That's the use case that we're thinking about for this predictive modeling that we're building on the platform.
Right. And it's really, it's like, I think this morning we talked about the need that IoT, everything will be connected, data exploding. We can't do it alone anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're all limited by gray matter, and there's only so much gray matter that we can process and so much data that we can put into our little brains and grind through it. So it just gotten to the point these days where we can't absorb the amount of data that we're seeing. You know, we heard from GE this morning, and I just think about things like jet engines, and I think about things like locomotives, and I think about large industrial scale printing presses. Right. And as that data comes into the platform, and as they do with their platform, trying to figure out when it needs to be serviced, we in turn need to think about the same thing within the enterprise. How do we look at data that's being processed for stories that are being developed in development? How do we think about data that we're looking at through some of the performance analytics data? How do we look at the machine data for anomaly detection? How do we process all that? You know, the joke used to be we couldn't process log files fast enough in our heads, so we had to go off and do some sort of new tooling around that. But now that log files look small in comparison to what we're actually trying to pull in.
Right. So we're going on this road of machine learning, AI. We learned about it. We're building it into the platform, but maybe a little bit more specific, because this is probably the biggest buzzword in the industry. You know, all these words are floating around, and if you want to sell your tools right now, you better have to, you know, market them as AI or machine learning or, you know, intelligent systems.
What are you saying about our marketing team?
So, what's real, what's not real, and what are we doing? Because we're known to be a pragmatic company. So can you shine a light on what it is that we're really doing?
Yeah, I mean, what we're doing is, you're right, machine learning and AI, it's everything from, you know, Teslas to flying cars to, you know, dead scientists. And what we're really trying to do is we're trying to figure out how do we figure out the use cases that make the most sense within the enterprise environment. So in our world, it really focuses on the letters we have in the middle of the slide here, and that's supervised machine learning. What that means is take specific data sets, build a predictive model against those data sets, and then take that predictive model and use it back in the customer instance on an individual instance by instance basis. So we're not necessarily doing natural language processing, we're not playing chess, we're not playing Go. What we're doing is we're actually doing supervised machine learning on individual customer content and then building a predictive model that that customer instance can then use.
So this is really about monetizing the data that you already have in your applications, right? It's like there's a, you know, thank you for being ServiceNow. For using ServiceNow, you collected all that data, and now we are going to give you the tools to kind of monetize that data and put that data to work for you.
That's right. That's right.
So what are some of the things that you can do with supervised machine learning? What are some of the use cases?
Yeah, in our particular case, we're coming after a very specific set of use cases you'll see us launch in Kingston. Those are around incident categorization, incident prioritization, task routing, things that we think that really in the ITSM world and some of the performance analytics world makes a lot of sense for us to do. But if we think about what our customers are going to be doing, they're going to be also building recommendations. They're also going to be doing smart routing of work based upon applications you're building on the platform. And this last little thing on here we talk about a lot is called Agent Assist. That is, you saw the demo from John this morning where he said somebody's looking at a particular case. And yes, you might see related cases, but you might see things like knowledge base articles show up. You might see things like runbook automations or orchestrations you could run. So the ability to have things that assist agents, whether in customer service or HR or IT, is some other great use cases that we think are going to be applicable on the platform.
Right. So and besides those supervised machine learning cases based on your own data, you'll see us doing on the time series data, whether it's in the ITOM world or in the predictive analytics world, you see us using, you know, advanced math and all kinds of machine learning algorithms to do those predictions, anomaly detection, pattern recognition.
Right.
Because that's where machine learning is really good at those kind of use cases.
Yeah, machines are great at recognizing patterns and then predicting anomalies off those patterns. Or like you were talking about earlier, being able to look at data that you've already predicted and seeing when you're going to pass a threshold or meet a goal, for example.
Right. So you know, we talked a little bit about machine learning and analytics being close cousins. How do you see that? Do you see that world merging? Do you see it blending? You know, how do you see that evolving in the next, let's say, 2-3 years? Do we still make the distinction between machine learning and analytics in 2-3 years from now?
That's a good question. You threw that one at me new. We do a little rehearsal backstage, but that was a new one. Yeah, I do see them as somewhat separate along the way. I mean, there are specific use cases that machine learning is very good at. And there's also ways that you want to be able to cut the data, slice the data, and be able to look and visualize the data. So from a PA perspective, from an analytics perspective, I think there's always going to be those visualization tools and the tools that'll be able to do those best fit, best line fit projections, but that's not really machine learning. Machine learning is taking the patterns, learning off those patterns, and coming up with a confident projection about the future. So I think the two marry very nicely together.
Right.
Did I get that right?
I'd agree with that. It's like
Okay,
we use machine learning to kind of prepare the data before we start visualizing it. So when we talk about data insights, Well, the machine will help us to come to those data insights. The machine will help us to build those recommendations, to build that agent assist, to discover that anomaly.
Right.
Then we need to visualize it and make sure we distribute those insights across the platform or across the applications. I think we're right on time.
Perfect.
So with that, Alan and I will be at the CreatorCon keynote talking about this topic a little bit more longer, and we'll be showing you how you can build recommendation centers within your own apps. So that's the CreatorCon keynote. And with that, I would like to thank you and enjoy the conference. Thank you very much.